Now, Kantar is said to have been the leader trying to open up a new front for Hezbollah in the Golan Heights, essentially a new front that Israel would have had to deal with. What information do you have on that?
Yeah, well, actually, the Israelis, it would be safe to say that his assassination was preemptive, not that the brigade meant to launch guerrilla warfare against the Israelis in the Golan Heights was an immediate threat to the Israelis. Now, Qatar was involved in building a Druze Hezbollah. And the Druze community, be it in Syria or Lebanon, does not really sit well with such a proposal. So one can make the claim that his assassination is not something good for the Israelis, but it is also good for the Druze community, both in Syria and Lebanon, and also for the Syrian regime, if you will, because after all, the Syrian president is not really interested in opening a front against the Israelis in the Golan.
So this could benefit both Israel and Syria, is what you're telling us. Tell us more a little bit about the calculus for Israel, if indeed it is Israel that carried out this strike, the calculus for Israel in these kinds of circumstances, because when they carry out precision bombings in these neighboring countries that are all opposed to Israel, enemies of Israel, it's always very difficult to carry out these attacks in a very volatile region. You never know exactly what the fallout will be. So what kind of factors do they have to balance?
Well, of course, the Israelis have a superb intelligence apparatus, and they have their people on the ground. And usually, their record at conducting such a precision attacks is well known, and it has been demonstrated time and again over the years. So, the Israeli intelligence is highly professional, and their military capabilities are superb, not only by Middle Eastern standards, but by international standards. And they are proficient at doing this kind of work.
But Hilal, my question is more about the regional political fallout. They're essentially bombing a foreign country. They bombed Damascus here.
Yeah.
What do they risk?
Nothing. The Syria is shattered by civil war, and this is not the first time the Israelis launched such an attack inside Syria. Again, I mentioned earlier that in 2008 they assassinated Imad Mughni, the key officer in Hezbollah, and the Syrians did not respond. If the Syrians did not respond in peacetime situation, there's certainly no reason for them to respond at a time when the Syrian army is embattled and is busy fighting against rebels throughout the country. And, the Israelis know what they are doing, and I don't even think that the Iranians would threaten their achievements with the U.S. with regard to the nuclear program and risk an attack against the Israelis right now, or even later.
You bring up the example of Imad Mughni, an important Hezbollah figure who was indeed assassinated. You could have also mentioned his son, Jihad Mughni, who was killed more recently.
Yeah, last January, of course. And,
You mentioned that there's basically no risk of an escalation with Syria. Syria, especially the regime in Damascus, too busy waging its own war, of course, protecting itself. What are the risks of an escalation with Hezbollah, however?
Well, I really doubt it very much. Again, Hezbollah will say that we will choose the time and the place for avenging the assassination of Kantar. But let's be realistic. Their options are quite limited. Right after the end of the July war in 2006, Hassan Nasrallah, Hezbollah's chief, was asked by a journalist. He was asked, had you known the consequences of your raid on an Israeli patrol inside Israel, would you have done it? Would you have launched the operation? He said, Hassan Nasrallah said, no, mainly because of the devastation for Lebanon and the death of more than 1,500 Lebanese Shiites, and the flight of more than 1 million Shiites from the south. So let's be realistic. Hezbollah will never put the community, the Shiite community, which is the basis of its support at jeopardy.
So he's not going to put the Shiite community at risk. So essentially, you're telling us that Hezbollah doesn't want to risk the well-being and the lives of its own people in Lebanon. One assumes that perhaps also it doesn't have the means to open up a new front, as it's already stretched fighting in Syria.
That is true. I mean, even without Hezbollah's heavy involvement in Syria, in classical terms, Hezbollah is no match for the Israelis. So with or without the war in Syria, Hezbollah's reaction wouldn't really have differed much.
All right, Hilal Khashan, thank you very much. Shedding some light now for us on the impact, limited impact, tells us Hilal today, of the airstrike yesterday that killed a Hezbollah figure in Damascus. Thank you very much.